interests me also is not only our direct ancestors, but the other strange, if you like, kinds of humans which died out. So today we're in an exceptional time when there is only one kind of human on the earth.
Yes, so that's the peculiar thing, yes. So we're very lonely on the planet. There's only modern humans here.
Well, I think for me personally, one of the most interesting questions is why we are the only humans left on Earth. So why did these other species disappear? Was it because of us?
At least 24 kinds of humans, other than us, had existed on the Earth. They survived through bitter winters, grim famines, and even predator threats. In the end, all perished, except us, Homo sapiens. But why? The final moment of a species. An individual who belonged to groups is now left out in solitude. With no one to share the fear of extinction, he endures life for a while. What could have been his last thoughts? Could his memory be found in us today? "950 meters above sea level, at the northeastern tip of the Spanish Highlands. In the late 1890s, a limestone hill was discovered while building a tunnel for train tracks. There, an astonishing discovery was made. From 1 million years ago to 0 AD, the hill had been a human habitat. In 1976, a student discovered a human jawbone here. Since then, it became the greatest archaeological site in the 20th century.
Tengo en las manos el cráneo de Homo antecesor. Homo antecesor apareció justo en este nivel, en el nivel 6 de la base de la gran dolina. En mi mano izquierda tengo el maxilar. Lo encontramos boca abajo en el yacimiento, todo recubierto de material. Lo levantamos cuando se excavó y vimos precisamente que este maxilar era un maxilar muy parecido a nuestra especie. Quedamos sorprendidos que un homínido de hace 800.000 años tuviera un maxilar muy parecido a nosotros.
Archaeology begins from bones and stones. A scrupulous search is made to find clues, to understand who became modern humans and how we, Homo sapiens, are one of them. The largest number of human remains have been found since historic times. Time was dusted off, and pieces were put together. Another species, other than Homo antecessor, had existed for 1 million years. There was Homo heidelbergensis. After a couple thousands of years, Neanderthals came along. Us, Homo sapiens, arrived at the end. The genealogy of the human race is like a tree with many branches. Breaking away from chimpanzees 7 million years ago, humans have evolved into diverse species. The 4 types of humans found here were recent inhabitants of the Earth. Now, we are the last survivors on the tree of human genealogy. It is unclear why we are the only ones left. We can only take small steps towards the truth. The truth can be uncomfortable sometimes. A large pit full of bones was discovered while digging 13 meters below the ground. "5,500 pieces of bones, belonging to 28 people in total, mostly in their late teens and 20s. They had been buried in a mass grave. Another strange thing was the stone axe. It is made of quartzite, which is too soft to make tools. Homo heidelbergensis was the owner. What had happened to them?
Si es solo una acumulación intencional de cadáveres, es decir, que cuando mataban a alguien o moría alguien, lo depositaban en su interior, esto sí que sabemos que era así, porque el cráneo 17 presenta 2 perforaciones.
The continuous hits near the left eye socket of the skull. It was a deliberate murder. Homo heidelbergensis, a human species that appeared 700,000 years ago and lived for 500,000 years. They are a shared ancestor between Neanderthals and us. Known as the first humans who practiced intraspecies killing. The cold silence reveals another truth.
The early human species, Homo heidelbergensis, lived in a dangerous world alongside animals like lions, hyenas, wolves and bears. And we can find direct evidence of that at Boxgrove.
Boxgrove, located in southern England, used to be a quarry. Here, a leg bone belonging to a well-built man in his 20s was found.
The size of the bone leads us to believe that this individual is nearly 6 foot tall, so that's around 1.80 m tall, 1.82 m. That's big and robust. So the frame, a big frame, muscular, something maybe like a modern day rugby player.
The bone also reveals his final moments.
Manner of an animal chewing on that end of the bone, and exactly the same on this end. These sort of breaks are characteristic of something chewing on the ends of the bone.
The owner of this bone had been eaten by an animal. You can see an unusual amount of scars on Heidelbergensis bone, which is proof of his exhausting life. Still, his robust frame could easily withstand a 90-kilogram body weight. Homo heidelbergensis, the most intelligent humans on the Earth. 2 to 3 human species coexisted with them. But none of them managed to outsurvive Homo heidelbergensis.
Life was certainly dangerous for these people. They had many predators around that would have eaten them. They also had to survive at times quite challenging climate conditions. The winters could have been very cold. And yes, their bodies were built with great strength. They had a lot of muscles, they had very thick bones. So life was very demanding and their bodies were built very strongly for those conditions.
The ecosystem was different from what it is now. Zebras weighed 80 kilograms more. An African buffalo had horns 2.5 times longer. Presumably, humans had to grow bigger. The glacial period came, and the Earth became more arid. Fierce competitions for food were inevitable. The death of a peer puts the entire group into peril. The group must overcome this shock.
Yo pienso que Homo heidelbergensis también utilizaba el lenguaje. Pienso que la capacidad cultural, la capacidad de desarrollar una cultura material y las actividades y las relaciones de grupo y sociales que llevan emparejado esto, por ejemplo, una caza colectiva, un compartir la alimentación, eso necesita de una comunicación.
The stone axe suggests the possibility of existence of language. Quartzite is not the type of rock found in this area. Imagine a friend is lying dead on the ground. He double-checks to assure his friend's death. This murder scene could be reinterpreted. They cracked the skull of the dead open, mashed his brain, and ate it. Could hunger be the reason? The primitive tradition, eating brains of dead to gain wisdom, could have been in play. The reddish rock they had traveled far to obtain was used for this particular purpose. This is why the stone axe was placed next to the corpse. Evidence for the beginning of a spiritual ritual. In this case, language is no longer an impossibility.
Es por eso que pensamos que Excalibur fue seleccionado la materia primera, y esta materia primera única, porque no hemos encontrado prácticamente este material ni en el campamento ni en ningún sitio, fue especialmente recogido y tallado para que tuviera estas características, y por eso pensamos que Excalibur podía ser un objeto no tan solo para trabajar, sino votivo, para asociar a los muertos.
The climate is becoming increasingly colder. Those with larger bodies manage to bear beyond their limits. Ultimately, yielded by drastic changes of the Earth, they disappear. Next, a stronger humankind, better suited for the coldness, appears. Once, we thought that modern humans had gradually evolved from a single ancestor and became us. However, just like other creatures, we had many branches. How did we come to know this? In 1975, Kenya, remains of Homo erectus were excavated. It was a surprising discovery because another humankind was known to already exist in this stratum. This was evidence that two different humankinds had coexisted. Here is the protagonist. Paranthropus boisei.
Modern tooth molars are going to be maybe a centimetre by a centimetre, but these are at least double. So they have really very large teeth, huge teeth.
Their molars were relatively huge compared to their incisors. Their faces were wide and flabby. A human species that lived about 2 million years ago. The shape of their jaw gave them a nickname, the Nutcracker Man. Their brain was about 1/3 the size of ours. During his time, about 5 to 6 human species competed against one another for survival. About 5 million years after, since the tree of humans grew, 3 human species with gracile frames, Homo habilis, Homo rudolfensis, and Homo ergaster, existed in Kenya, Africa. At that time, there also lived more robust species, like Paranthropus boisei. We, Homo sapiens, were a member of the gracile species. Just like other creatures, humans have a sizable family with numerous branches. Boisei were vegetarians. Males were 130 centimeters tall and weighed 49 kilograms on average. How do they maintain this physique? This room preserves time, which dates back 2 million years ago. Professor Macho uses the teeth of primitives to travel through time and space.
What these things are the storage organs of grasses that were eaten by boisei. They're relatively large. They're as large as chickpeas. They're quite sweet, and they're rich in carbohydrates. This handful has about 300 calories. So actually quite great nutritional value. But of course you need to chew it quite a while to digest it.
Their strong jaw and wide face were developed because they had to chew excessively.
When the teeth started to become smaller, the process didn't start with cooking, but it started with the emergence of Homo. And generally we associate it with habitual consumption of meat, because meat is high in quality, so you don't need to eat that much.
What did eating meat mean to humans? First, hunting became a necessity. They had to devise complicated strategies compared to when eating plants. Consequently, their brains were enlarged. Mainly, the brain is a chunk of fat. It requires an extreme amount of nutrients. To consume the same calories, substantial amount of grass needs to be consumed, just like boisei. Humans can only consume a limited amount of energy at a time. Naturally, the brain has no choice but to compete with other organs for energy.
They plotted the brain size versus gut size and showed that there was indeed an inverse relationship between the brain size and the gut size. In other words, animals with big brain had small gut, and animals with big gut had small brain. So there was the compatible data to show that there cannot be both big investment in those organs.
Our bodies consume 1.25 watts of energy per kilogram on average. Muscles use 0.5 watts per kilogram. The skin, 0.3 watts. It accounts for a large space, but it is energy efficient. Next, there are the more expensive tissues. The heart uses 32.3 watts. The kidneys, 23.3 watts. The intestines, 12.2 watts. And the brain, 11.2 watts. The heart and kidneys have to maintain their sizes to fulfill their functions. However, the intestines can become shorter if the quality of diet is improved. When humans began eating meat, they evolved to have shorter intestines and larger brains. Boisei ate an incredible amount of plants. To maintain their bodies, they had to eat 8 hours per day. They were easily exposed to predators in their search for food. A life spent eating just to gain enough energy to find more food. Living slowly, always in search for pastures. Was this a good strategy?
The interesting point is, in order to maintain that amount of brain size and that size of body, they had to probably eat as much as a big gorilla, who were 4 times as big as them. In other words, what they ate, they had to eat as much as gorillas and barely maintain 1/4 size, 25% of the body size, meaning the quality of their food was extremely low.
The land where both robust and gracile humans roamed. A battle was fought between the brain and the stomach. Boisei, which chose the stomach, may not have been unfortunate. While the gracile humans who chose meat starved without food, they thrived for about 1 million years. Fossils show that Boisei disappeared approximately 1.2 million years ago. Humans with square jaws and round faces. Now, the time of the humans who chose the brain, despite hunger, begins. We do not have to eat all day like Boisei. Just like Homo heidelbergensis, we are the most intelligent creatures on this earth. With greater ego than any other species, we also live in communities. It seems like much has changed, but most remain similar.
A latte, a large latte. Thank you very much.
Professor Robin Dunbar is interested in why the human brain grew bigger. Instead of studying bones and rocks, he conducts cognitive experiments.
There have been lots of theories as to why brains have got bigger in the course of human evolution. For making tools, you need a bigger brain for more complicated tools, perhaps for meat eating. But the key really seems to be able to create large communities which are bonded together, cohesive communities which can act to defend themselves against predators, against other tribes from nearby.
Apes formed groups, to stand up against predators. The size of these groups was correlated to the size of the brain. This applies to humans as well. The orbital frontal cortex is a part of the frontal lobe located close to the eye. The larger the group which a person interacts with, the larger the orbital frontal cortex becomes. People with larger orbital frontal cortex have a higher desire to contact a greater number of people within the same time. We all want to communicate with others and make sense of them. We are a species that overcomes the limitations of our body through forming relationships. Groups are skins that hold mankind together. Now, we are at the era when formation of groups determine the survival of humanity. The Earth enters its last glacial epoch. There was a human species which lived in this unforgiving coldness. They were Neanderthals, who appeared about 300,000 years ago. 100,000 years later, we, Homo sapiens, would appear and compete with them. They had larger brains than us. At most, they lived about 30 to 35 years. They had short lifespans. And led a busy life, moving from place to place. Although their entire population never exceeded 70,000, they spread across the frozen continent.
Neandertales sabemos que eran grupos reducidos. De hecho, la población neandertal en general es bastante menor en número si la comparamos, por supuesto, actualmente con la población sapiens e incluso en la prehistoria. Es decir, siempre los neandertales fueron pocos.
Living in harsh climates, they understood the importance of each other well. Funerals were held for the dead. Could it have been because of the miserable reality? They knew feelings of grief and loss. Although their day-to-day lives were filled with hardships, they knew deeper meanings in life. Like us, they were curious about what lies beyond death. Perhaps they had developed burial rituals faster than we had. They acknowledged the loneliness better than anyone else. Although they lived in a similar period of time as us, Neanderthals have some unique characteristics.
Consumían bastante carne y de hecho en algunos estudios se han considerado como unos hipercarnívoros situados en las cadenas tróficas por encima de los predadores como por ejemplo el león o las hienas.
Neanderthals were violent and capable of hunting. They brought down deers, bears, buffaloes, and even mammoths. If the opponent was a powerful beast, they relied on their head rather than strength. No other humans had patience like theirs. Here, they provoke the beast. Hunts determine the fate of the group. Each death was a painful loss, especially since they have a small population. An intelligent, strong, and brave human species. Unfortunately, these strengths may have led to their downfall. Neanderthals were stronger and more muscular than Homo sapiens. In order to maintain their body heat and strength, they needed up to 350 kilocalories more than us each day. If it were today, this slice of pie would be sufficient. Neanderthals had to hunt. Throughout their lives, they either feasted or starved, depending on the outcome of their life-threatening hunts. They worked together and shared fairly. This behavior was the key to their long survival. Looking at these lost humans, we can see our future. This elderly scholar has devoted his entire life to the study of linguistics. Philip Lieberman does not think that language is an exclusive property of Homo sapiens.
They lived for several 500,000 years in very cold climates in Europe that cope with the end of the glacial. So Neanderthals clearly had a language. And some people have suggested they just hummed. That's, I think, nonsense.
The fundamental function of language is communication. It fortifies relationships. As complex as their lives had been, they must have had a language.
The only thing I would say is you can't have a word with an E or an U, and it's probably their speech was a little nasalized. And we can tell that by looking at their airways. When you reconstruct, you look at the skull and you look at the neck bones of the neck, you can see the limits of the anatomy would do it. So the speech would be, okay.
A system of song-like sounds to convey emotion. Gestures with meanings. Languages consolidate groups. People use languages to talk about politics, economy, society, and others. The more time they spend communicating, the more unified the group becomes. Professor Dunbar believes that these human relationships had an effect on the human brain.
People use their big brains to talk about their friendships with each other, their relationships, the complexities of the social world in which we live. That's the sort of icing on the cake of this whole process. Monkeys and apes create their kind of bonded communities by grooming each other. Live in big groups, spend a lot of their day doing this kind of social grooming to each other. So somehow language is like grooming.
Usually, apes groom one ape at a time. However, language is conveyed to multiple people at once. The reason humans were able to form larger groups than apes was because of this language. Neanderthals, who had larger brains than us, had entered the realm of language first. But what made them disappear? Was it the climate? We survived the cruel coldness in the final glacial epoch with them. Then why is it us who are left standing?
Pero fundamentalmente no vivían, su longevidad no era tan prolongada, tan extendida como la nuestra, sino que probablemente sus tiempos de vida eran mucho más cortos que nosotros. Uno de los aspectos que estamos ahora estudiando es precisamente el ciclo biológico de los neandertales.
A tooth is a record keeper of an individual's entire life. It can be used to reconstruct the biological clock of primitives. Teeth grow like trees. Layers are accumulated. The part formed first rises to the top. The lower part of the tooth tells the death time of an individual. Lines are formed when an individual suffers from poor nutrition or disease. These lines can be used to speculate periods of great stress.
Pues hemos visto en los neandertales que en el momento del destete se produce una crisis en su crecimiento. Y esa crisis se manifiesta en lo que llamamos técnicamente hipoplasia dental. Es decir, en los dientes aparecen unas líneas.
While we get permanent molars at the age of 10, they get molars at the age of 6. Their childhood was 4 years shorter than ours. Neanderthals had no time to enjoy their childhood. They had to grow up fast to replace the adults who died early. At the end of the glacial epoch, their population had dwindled to 5,000.
Why would we slow down our childhoods? You know, modern humans have one of the longest childhoods on the planet, and many people have offered ideas about what's the advantage of having a long and slow childhood. One idea is that modern humans allow a longer period for our brains to develop and our social behaviors to be mastered.
During childhood, we learn the complex rules of society. The brain develops in quality during this time. What Homo sapiens had, and the Neanderthals did not have, was a long childhood. the last individual standing. From 15 to 10, then to 5, and finally, alone. Near the end of the final glacial epoch, Neanderthals vanished from the Earth. Eventually, all species may encounter such a fate.
There's no reason why humans should be an exception that will go on forever. When we look in the past, it's the fate of almost every species that existed in the past disappeared. In our own case, yes, we are not invulnerable. I think humans, we could go extinct in the future, of course we could.
In the final 30,000 years, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens had met. How would our ancestors have treated these hardy humans with large heads? Had he known that his death meant the end of his own kind? If he had, he too would have asked why it had been us and not them.